fellow Earthlings, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of And Another Thing with Dave. I just kind of wanted to do a personal introduction to this episode. A thank you. It's kind of a year-end episode. There's going to be two more episodes in the year, and Freedom Rain is going to be my guest wrapping up the year. I met him on the Stereo app, and I'll read his bio right here. Freedom Rain, Oakland, California, music, poetry, elementary teacher in graphic design, individual thinker and destroyer of narratives. We get into it about why education is not free in the U.S. This is going to be a great podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all the listeners from throughout the world. We've got listeners from India, the United Kingdom, Canada, Romania, the Netherlands, Russia, Thailand, the Czech Republic, and many more. Thank you so much. I am humbled. All right, let's get into it. Hey,
Yeah.
can we do a little intro? Why don't you
sure.
introduce yourself? And then I'll follow suit, and then we can jump in, man. I'm
All
super
right.
psyched to have you on the line, man. I'm super psyched you approved the show. It was a last minute idea, and I thought I couldn't think of anybody better to talk about this topic with than you. So
Right on. I
fired
really
up.
appreciate the invite. Yes, I'm Freedom Rain. I've been on Stereo since November last year. And I'm also an elementary school teacher. I used to teach kindergarten. I pretty much taught every grade you can teach up to high school. I have not taught high school. And I'm also pretty active in my community, doing things like social economic work and volunteering and doing some work with the homeless. But yeah. And you?
Right on. And there it is in a nutshell, my brother. Right on, fighting the good fight.
There you go.
Yeah. So myself, I am. I'm a political activist. I've got interested in this type of, in that type of function around about 5 years ago, which is when I started my podcast, right? Because I'd be having these deep conversations with a couple different friends of mine. And
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I would be like, man, that was a radio show, but nobody's going to hear what we just talked about for 2 hours except for you and me. And it was
Yeah.
killing me. I'm like, because, we were covering good ground. And so that I started a podcast, and I
It's
just kind
great.
of haven't made a dime doing it, but that's not the motivation, right? The motivation is just to talk to people. Like my one of my taglines is, I'm not telling you what to think, I'm just telling you to think, man, right?
Yeah.
Don't believe
Yeah.
corporations. Think for yourself. A corporation or a government never has your best interest in mind. They're always looking at
Never.
their bottom line,
Right. I was
right?
just looking at that article right before you called about how 37 members of Congress got caught violating their own insider trading laws, and that the penalties are either usually waived or about $200, which is pretty much nothing if you just made a killing off of some insider knowledge that you're self-regulating in that governmental body. So you're absolutely
I
right.
would
Mhm.
I would venture to say you and I getting pulled over at a stop sign for like doing a California stop for the people that aren't in the state. That's when you just kind of tap your brakes, but you don't really stop.
Right.
I bet the fine for that's more than $200. So we're getting fined
Absolutely.
more for something, a routine traffic stop.
Right.
When
And uh-huh.
90% of the time when I do that, and I don't even like to do it anymore. I try not to do it anymore. But when I used to do it,
Mm-hmm.
I would only do it if I looked around, and 90% of the time at
Exactly.
night. You look around, there's no headlights, there's nobody coming. You're good,
Right.
right?
Right.
But with corporate crime, are we ever good?
Well, and it just shows that our governmental system kind of incentivizes that kind of bad behavior. So then if we're talking about money into politics, we focus on the small players where the rubber meets the road. We never even get to the point where we're reevaluating the system as a whole, because we've got bad behavior being incentivized to the point where even Uncle Joe, who ran for Congress, is doing stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that, man. Is that we got to get money out of politics if we're ever even going to have a chance at unbiased for the people um, policies.
Well, and I love what you just said about where the rubber meets the road, right? Because we could talk about, the only things that the lame, I like to call it the lamestream media, right? Like anything you're going to get on over like cable, right?
Hmm.
It's so tired. It's so just a loudspeaker for the corporation that it's obvious, right? And
Period.
it's so they don't have any ideas. They're not offering anything. They're just like, oh my God, right? Like fear, 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 fear,
Yeah,
fear, fear,
sensationalism.
problem, right? But no solution.
Right. Okay, but what would you say to someone who says, I don't know the percentage, and I definitely don't want to underestimate people. But what do you think about the general American public being completely satisfied and invested in that? Like you're saying, it's obvious, and to me, it is too. But I have a couple family members of the older generation. Everything they see on the news is true. It's undisputable to them. What do you think about
Straight
that?
up, straight up. My mom loves Joe Biden,
Yeah.
you know, thinks he's a good Democrat and thinks he's actually very progressive. And I love my mom, so I just had to bite my tongue.
Yeah, that's how I'm on a lot of these
Yeah.
issues too.
And I'm not a Republican, people. I need to say that. I'm not a two-party guy, right?
I'm not a
I'm
two
I'm
party guy either.
right. I'm done with that. Done with that. I've been let down. And I'm
Absolutely.
50 and I'm 54. So I'm not talking about like, I got a little bit of time under my belt, right? Where I've seen consistency by both parties, right? And so what I see now is both parties being, it now what we have is the consolidation of our political system to the point where we have the
Period.
left and right of the corporate party.
That's all it is. And the thing that they've been really good at this last couple years, especially in 2020, is using each other's mistakes um or outright transgressions instead of saying, hey, the system is broken, we need to change this so this doesn't happen. What they'll do is the right will say, oh, look at the left, we need to implement more changes and more restrictions that are ultimately hamper
Right.
you and me, the original I mean the
Mm-hmm.
average citizens. And then when the right messes up, the left will say, oh, we need more oversight. They play this game of tennis with our rights that they never get in
Exactly.
trouble. We only lose it. And the American people are so caught up in it, like, yeah, teach those right wing conservatives. Yeah, I'll give up my rights. Just teach them a lesson. And then when Joe Biden or our new Democrats in office, the right is like, oh, look at them. And we don't get that by playing this tribal mentality back and forth tennis game that power is only getting consolidated further. The richest corporations are only getting richer, and we're the only ones losing liberty and rights. But we're so invested in this spectator sport mentality, you know.
Thank you. That was brilliantly worded. I love the way you said that, and I could not agree more. What I think is the epitome of that, brings that to like, just shines a light on the heart of that issue
Mm.
is how really nothing happened. Nothing changed between Bush and Obama, right? Stuff got
Mm-hmm.
so dark during Bush, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you lied us into war. Like by that time, it was like 500,000 dead Iraqis. Like really for a lie?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh damn. I mean, granted, we lost some people, but
Absolutely.
it was Saudi Arabia, man. And we
Right.
still fund them. We still fund them. And Israel might have been involved because they were the dancing Israelis, right? Like
Yeah.
on the roof of a van that day, and it was
Yeah.
just too weird. So, but
Yeah.
but we don't investigate that. We don't investigate that at all. We just go blow up a couple countries. And there was actually a quote that I heard, and it was George Bush saying to the CIA, or it might have even been to Colin Powell,
Mm-hmm.
one of those. Don't quote me, but it was basically Saddam Hussein, 9/11, find me a connection.
Mm.
Like we're going to invade, give me the reason,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're absolutely right. And when, as it ties into our discussion today, why college is not free, it's the same thing about the political system. Is this, and I think me and you said this before, it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to. And
Absolutely. It's
And
going on
so,
all cylinders right now. It's firing on all cylinders. It's
yeah,
it's the most efficient it's ever been.
yeah,
That's what
uh,
people don't understand. They're
right.
and George Bush Jr. was made out to be like a buffoon, right? Like, oh,
Oh
oh
man.
shucks. Well, he
Hmm.
just don't know what he's doing. Oh shucks, he's just a good old boy. Like, are you kidding me? Come on. He went to Princeton. He might not have had a great grade average, but he
Right.
went to Princeton. He is of a royal bloodline. He might as well be like a U.S. king, the
Right.
descendant of a U.S. king, basically, right? So are
Right.
you kidding me? Are you kidding me? He
Yeah.
had people, advisors and teachers and trainers, and like his chauffeur on the way to junior high school would probably be teaching him history lessons about real shit that we've never learned about, right? But
Absolutely.
then he goes in front of a camera and he plays, oh shucks, I just put on my cowboy boots and oh shucks, let's have a beer. You know
Right.
what?
And the left in general, all people, but the left especially, was so content in making fun of how dumb he was and how silly and harmless he was, that they were almost preoccupied with the show of the act that he's putting on and letting serious transgressions getting away. And honestly, the same thing with Trump, or what a lot of people are calling the Trump derangement syndrome, is we're so focused on his personality, what he does and says, oh, he's so stupid, he's so egotistical, that we're so caught up in that it feels good to make fun of him, that we're not actually making any change. And now, just so you can see how broken and unsighted this thing is, now it's the same thing with Joe Biden. I hear everybody talking about, oh, he can't even remember
Mhm.
his words. He's senile. Oh ha 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 ha. And it's so funny. It's just so funny to people that they're not focusing. Is like, you don't understand that this back and forth sensationalist acting game is letting them consolidate more and more power, while you're so busy putting on the little rubber mask with the big ears making fun of the president. That is exactly
Thank
what
you.
they're meant for, is to draw your ire from the real system. And I just see that
Thank you.
happening, and people just playing right into it. Oh, slow Joe. Ha, ha, ha. Oh, orange man Trump. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, Obama. Ha, ha, ha. Bush. Like, what? Huh. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Thank you. No, nobody, I mean, come on, if you're not a really, really bright person and very shrewd and
Mm-hmm.
willing to do anything that needs to be done,
Mm-hmm.
you will never make it to that rank. Come on,
No.
let's just check ourselves. Let's just do a reality check. You'll never, ever, ever make it through like, come on, the deep state needs to approve of who the president is, or else they'll take him out, right? We've seen this happen in the past.
We've seen it happen in the past, and we see it
So
repeated. And with that system you just acknowledged about there being historically over the last 50 years or so, over 300 million people in the US. But yet you're telling me that George Bush, um, Prescott Bush, works his way up to be high level within the government and FBI. George Bush Sr. happens to be president and director of the CIA, and George Bush Jr. happened to be president, and Jeb Bush happens to be governor. Like, wait, what? No nepotism involved. We promise. It's a fair system. Anyone can work their way up. It just so happens that these huge oil giant power families happen to have had, and let's not start on the Clintons and the Rodhams. It's like, are you serious, man? Like, we're
thank
really
you.
supposed to believe
Thank you.
it's not rigged at
Thank
all.
you. Thank you, Freedom Reign. Because like what you're talking about is complete nepotism, but not only that, what you're
Mm,
talking about is the fact that we've never lost the system of royalty that
nope,
we quote unquote rebelled from England, right?
nope,
Well,
absolutely.
come on. Come on now. The Bush family, that's a royal family. The Rockefellers, that's a royal
Exactly.
family. The Clintons, that's a royal family. And granted, they got there by murder. We could go into that later. But,
Oh, and that brings up one of the things, because you were saying you can't just make your way up to that system, and a lot of people had looked at Trump as this example of an outsider who made his way in, and the deep state hated him because he was unplanned. And bro, just all due respect, look back at Trump's family history. His grandfather
he's not an
came to this
outsider.
country a billionaire, and
Oh,
he'd
yeah.
been in. and his family's been involved at the highest levels. His uncle was with one of some of the people that raided Tesla's apartment when he died. Like, let's just stop playing the game. It's like everybody who's involved in this political system has skin in the game, and I think again that's really important to mention, because as we're trying to reform and make decisions, that I'm not saying that people don't have power, but if a politician, just like these 37 members of Congress who got caught doing insider trading, breaking their own rules, is if a politician isn't willing to take money out of politics and people aren't willing to take money out of politics, then please stop pretending like you're trying to create a better system or doing your part to create a different world. Sitting and voting every 4 years
Thank you.
is not going to change anything.
No, it hasn't done a damn thing, right? Like my whole family are Democrats and they've voted Democrat my entire life. I'm 54. It
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed. It hasn't changed a damn thing. It hasn't. And there's this major separation, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
Republicans are willing to murder a liberal person. But the Democrats, they're gonna draft legislation, maybe, if they do anything. Mostly they roll over. Mostly they roll over and don't do anything. Like I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
like since Reagan.
Oh yeah,
Before Reagan, the Democrats actually fought like LBJ, helped
yeah.
the impoverished immensely in this country, right? Granted, Nixon was dropping drugs, so who knows? He was probably part of that. He was probably part of the MK Ultra experiments at the same time, so it's twisted, right? It's twisted. They're
It's
all
super
dark.
twisted.
They're all dark to a certain extent if they make it to that degree, but that doesn't mean that they cannot do good things, right? So
Right. That's a good point to realize, is that you can't be so deranged with this, that like you can't look at Trump's presidency objectively and just ask what things did he do to benefit. Okay, Obama, what things did he do to benefit? Because there's always a give and take. You can't have a like
mhm,
Bush in my lifetime was the closest to a president who I saw do whatever the f he want with no recourse.
zero
Like
benefit and
lost
zero benefit.
zero benefit. And I listened to his pledges before he got elected. He's like, I'm against nation building, and then that's what he spent his entire presidency doing in the Middle East after
and and he was
launching an
and he was for smaller
unconstitutional war.
government,
Smaller,
and then he created the
the
Department of Homeland
Patriots Act,
Security, the
right? The
Patriot
Patriot
Act,
Act.
which Biden actually wrote, but
I
he
heard
passed
that.
it. Yep,
Old Biden.
Biden Biden wrote that himself. He actually, with pen in hand, that
I
is
know.
his baby.
I just learned that this year, and it's so
Yeah,
funny
Biden's a
because
Republican, man, and so was
yeah, and
Bush. So was Obama. I mean,
right. And your choices are like, I remember this was one of my first elections being old enough to vote. Is I remember it was John Kerry versus Bush. And it came out that they were both, these Ivy League school guys who were both in the Skull and Bone Society. And
yep,
that was admitted by them out of their mouth. So I'm just like, how much choice do we really have? We're voting for a different person, a different face, but literally we're
right.
voting for the same interests, and they admit
Oh
it.
yeah, you're
it
voting for the left and right of the same coin, dude. They're both from the
exactly.
same secret society,
Yeah. And
which
it's
they
not a conspiracy. It's admitted on live
it's
TV
admitted.
by those
Bush
guys.
Yeah, Bush himself said in an interview, he's like, well, that's why they call it a secret society. I can't tell you about it.
And John Kerry more or less echoed those
End of
exact same
discussion.
sentiments. Yeah, exactly.
End of discussion, right? So these
Exactly.
people have an oath to that above the country. And you're going to
Absolutely.
trust them? Really?
Right. Right,
Really?
right, right.
Okay.
and
Okay.
for And as this topic says, why college isn't free, I think this can be divided into two questions. This is like,
Yeah.
why isn't college always free? How come it hasn't always been free? And then a separate question is, why isn't it free now? Because I think that
Well, true.
there's even people, average people like you and me, that would have an argument of why it isn't free now. Which one did you want to tackle first?
Well, thank you for breaking that down because I want to hit it from both sides, like you were
Yes.
saying, because it used to be free in California,
Mm-hmm.
right? State
Mm-hmm.
state college, right? Now, if you want to go to a private college, that's on you. Knock yourself out. But this is the example of how our healthcare system could be, right? You go to a
Mm-hmm.
state college, it's all free. All you
Mm-hmm.
pay for is books. And if
Right.
you're low income, you could get your books covered.
You can get a
But
voucher.
for
Mm-hmm.
Right, but for your average Joe, if I was to go sign up, I would have no tuition costs. I
Mm-hmm.
would only pay for books, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe a maybe a one-time registration cost to cover like office fees. Or I don't even know. But
Right.
I know my mom went to college for free and it changed her life. She went from being
Mm-hmm.
a telephone operator where she literally unplugged and plugged in the cords physically
Remember
back in the
that?
day.
Remember that job? Yeah.
That was my mom, dog.
Oh,
So
wow.
she went from that trying to raise three kids, then she had
Mm-hmm.
me, four kids.
Four and a
It
half.
it was
You got a big appetite.
right, maybe three and a half. Not whatever, however you look at it. uh, but but you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
it would have been rough. We would have been on assistance for the get, unless she was able to go to college, and she did. But it took her 10
Mm.
years because she had to work. She was raising kids. Blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, she got into politics, dog. All of a sudden, when I'm in high school, I'm seeing my mom on the cover of the newspaper.
Yeah.
Like, she's busting moves, right? It was cool.
Ooh. So how does that look for you? We'll get back into this discussion of college, but how does that look for you now at this age, knowing what the government is and what it's designed to do, but still having average people like your mom being able to work that way her way into the system? Do you think she had the ability to really make change? Do you think that people with good intentions are kind of
No.
left like with go ahead. He's like, no.
I think you're patted on the back and told, hey, attaboy, but you can only make so much change. And
Mm.
if you start really ruffling feathers, you're going to get canned, you're going to get removed, you'll get replaced.
Or Kennedy'd.
And and I was headed there. Martin Luther.
Yeah,
Once
you
you
get
get
Martin
50,
Luther.
once you get 50,000 people to follow you, you're done.
Oh
You're
man,
fucking done. You're going to be
dude.
Martin Luthered. You're going to be JFK'd. You're going to
Hmm.
be
Larry P.
John
McDonald,
frickin' what's his name from the Beatles?
John
You
Lennon.
know, John Lennon.
Man,
Thank you. Right? Like,
God, yeah.
was it really some deranged fan that ran up and shot him in front of his place for absolutely no reason? Or was
So
that the Manchurian candidate created by the
right.
CIA to take out some guy who was like changing the way the world thought about stuff?
And again, just like Martin Luther King, as long as he was talking about integration or anything that was on the liberal left's agenda, he was absolutely fine. When he started the Poor People's Campaign, that was completely destroying the racial
Thank you.
division by bringing poor whites and poor blacks together, and when he started speaking against the Vietnam War and started talking about boycotting big corporations like Coca-Cola at the time, that's when they pulled his number. They were like, nope. And the same
Yeah.
thing with
No,
Kennedy. When he didn't want to go to Vietnam, they had to get him out the way. It's like, no, it is absolutely on the menu that we need to go to Vietnam. And you're absolutely right that in the John Lennon situation, in the Robert Kennedy and the JFK and the Martin Luther King, we're all always told to believe in this loose nut. It was a lone gunman who was just pissed off and he
bullshit.
went and killed him. And then like it
Bullshit.
was Martin Luther King Jr. Talked with James Earl Jones, excuse me, about and James Earl Jones was saying, "I did not kill your father. This is what really happened." And uh, MLK Jr. said, "I believe him." He looked him right in his face in prison and said, "That is not the man who is responsible for my father's death." And we're told about Sirhan and Robert Kennedy. It's like we
Yep. And
we're letting.
Sirhan, to this
Hmm.
day, Sirhan says he has no memory of actually pulling the trigger. He's like, I was in
Mm,
this look, but he remembers the whole day. He's like, I was over here. Then all of a sudden, there's a blank spot, and I'm over there, and somebody
hmm.
told me I killed the president. Like, what the
Yep.
fuck?
Yep.
Manchurian candidate.
Same thing with Harvey Lee Oswald. Paraded him around in front of the media, hoping that to give Jack Ruby the chance to shut him. And He's saying, I'm a patsy. I'm a patsy. As soon as he said, I'm a patsy and that I'm not responsible and I had a CIA handler, they're not going to let this
Bam,
go to court to be televised to be one of the highest
bam, right,
watched court. They're like, nope, he needs to die. Come on now.
bam.
Like,
Yep.
we're not stupid.
And,
But,
and for people who think we're crazy, right? Okay, so the Iran Contra scandal,
oh, God.
George Bush Sr.,
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan, and George Bush Sr. and Oliver North. Oliver North was the patsy. He was found
Yep.
guilty, but he's free now.
Yep.
They
Oh, okay. I didn't
smuggled,
know it's free.
yep, yeah, it's crazy, dude. He's free doing $1 million a year book tour. Like, are you kidding me? So they supervised an arrangement where Freeway, this is what gave birth to Freeway Ricky Ross. This guy,
Exactly.
Barry Seal, was flying plane loads of cocaine into the United States, and Oliver North would turn off the radar system, turn off
Mm-hmm.
the United States National Defense System to let this
Mm-hmm.
plane through on the reg, a, a flight a week, 3.1 tons of cocaine per flight in
Right.
a customized CIA plane. They had two identical CIA planes, right? They always had one in the US and one was on a mission. So when one
Mm-hmm.
landed, boom, the other one would take off.
Right.
So they could always be like, oh no, the plane's right here in the hangar. But what happened one time is the plane got shot down
Yep.
over Nicaragua. And all of a sudden they're like, well, what the fuck? This is a CIA plane. And that's when the shit hit the fan. And we found out that what they were doing is they were smuggling cocaine from Nicaragua, landing in Panama, refueling, and then flying into the U.S. So
And
we carpet bombed. We carpet
yeah,
bombed Panama. Give me 1 second.
yeah.
We killed 20,000 civilians in Panama
Wow.
to try to get the leader, Manuel Noriega, because
Mm,
once again, he couldn't talk. He knew way too much,
way too
right?
much.
So who knows where that guy is now? Where is Manuel Noriega? It's like, where
Right.
is Carmen Sandiego? Where is
Yeah.
Manuel Noriega? Is he
Yeah.
dead? Is he in Abu Ghraib? Like, he's either in solitary confinement somewhere in a cave, or he's dead because they couldn't even risk him being in solitary because something he
No.
might get free. So he's dead,
Right. And so
guaranteed.
that what you just said is not a conspiracy. I even watched some of the court proceedings and I watched Oliver North's testimony and I watched the first time ever prosecutors literally while Oliver North was on there. This is something we could never do. They asked Oliver North a question about the area of government he worked in. And one of the presiding judges says, I'm sorry, may I ask that we please do not touch upon that at this time? And then the prosecutor who's prosecuting Oliver North is like, "Wait, are you serious? This is a question that directly implicates." And he says, "Look, I if we want to go into this, we can make different arrangements at another time. But I ask that we please not touch upon that at this time." And they completely stopped the proceedings to do that. And basically, what that means is give us time to figure out a lie. Give us time to burn the evidence. Give us
And
time to.
when does the court do that? Like when the
When do they
person
do
on
that?
trial says, "Please don't ask me about this." Like
Yeah.
not that's when you ask harder and you dig
Yeah.
deeper. You're like, "Okay, we got a guilty motherfucker here."
But in this case, it was the actual judges that said, we're not going to touch
Right.
upon that. It's
We're
like,
going to
are
call for
you,
a recess. Yeah, we're
yeah, are
not
you
going to
kidding?
those
And
questions are off limits now. Like, what?
yeah, and what you brought up is really
What?
important in these days and ages of misinformation, crazy tin hat conspiracy theories, all these things that we're being led to believe are just running wild on social media. Is that right now the president who's dealing with the most information is misinformation and theories and quelling dissent is Joe Biden, and we find out that 10 what is this several years ago, about 15 years ago, he penned the Patriot
Patriot Act.
Act. So right
1994.
now,
He wrote
yeah,
it.
oh, okay. So right now, that Patriot Act is giving him extra power to deal with all the misinformation that's happening in his presidency, which we know are we're dealing with the most controversial things ever: mandated vaccines, censoring people on public platforms, private platforms, election fraud. Just all this stuff is happening now, and it seems like
Arresting journalists,
arresting
Julian
journalists.
Assange,
Oh
Manly,
yeah,
and whistleblowers, right? Like
and Edward
whistleblowers have
Snowden.
become
Yeah,
have become like target number one, right?
is
Like
that a
enemy number one.
coincidence? Is it a
Well,
coincidence that Joe Biden pinned this and now he's utilizing it at the most time with the most
imagine that.
dissent? Oh my God. Yeah. But there's no.
In
So,
savage fashion. But it didn't just
yeah.
start. Obama arrested more reporters under the Espionage Act than
Mm,
all presidents before him combined, right? So
mm,
I I got to keep
wow.
reiterating. People might have just tuned in. I got to keep reiterating. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican.
Me
Neither
either.
is Freedom Reigned. We are
Mm-mm.
free-minded, free-thinking people. Give me a reason to think about voting for you. Don't, because I'm not on some platform. I'm not just doing some disco party line. Like, no, what's your platform?
Absolutely. I'm not going to vote for
I'm
you
not
just
following
because that's the
anybody.
cultural norm. Absolutely not.
Hell no.
And real
Hell
quick,
no.
let me for this I want to say this in 30 seconds is that everything that another thing brought up about the Iran Contra scandal, that was just one side of it. We're not even talking about the side where they armed rebels to secure the cocaine, and made all
We
kind of
have,
shady
yeah.
illegal trades. And so that's why it's really important in this time. I get it. There are some conspiracies that people just don't think through and people just have an echo chamber and repeat shit. But I think it's really important to realize what our government has done and is capable of doing, literally smuggling cocaine into our borders, which then, of course, supplied the rich and famous with cocaine, Studio 54 and all this stuff. But then also, we know that Gary Webb, a journalist, was murdered for pointing out how that scandal
Thank
and
you.
that cocaine being smuggled in was directly linked to the crack epidemic in the black communities, and then the subsequent war on drugs, which has completely changed the landscape of black communities since. So we can't just be so quick to absolve and say, oh, you people are crazy. You people are crazy. Just, you know, everybody just needs to be temper minded and really think through things critically. We got
And
to
really look at the history. Really look at the history, right?
look at the
Because
history.
all right, thanks for tuning into another episode and another thing with Dave. Please follow, subscribe, and share. I'm on all social media and another thing with Dave. And keep seeking the truth.